Love is like a fever which comes and goes quite independently of the will. Most of us like to think of ourselves as reasonably logical. We consider the available data, develop well-reasoned judgments, and reach thoughtful conclusions that withstand close examination. But there is one circumstance that will make even the most rational people into frantic, overly nervous messies. Furthermore, this is a perfectly regular occurrence rather than a terrible tragedy or severe trauma. Possessing a crush. One of the most philosophically fascinating mental states is a crush, which is particularly common among young people. Most of us have experienced them, and most of us have done quite embarrassing things in their service. They are a strange combination of love, passion, and limerence. However, we almost ever look into the reasons why crushes can grasp us so tightly, cause us to act erratically, and above all, cause pain. And Stendhal examined this special fusion of desire and suffering with great vigor in his book, On Love. Therefore, in order to construct a loose philosophy of the crush, we will be using his ideas, as well as numerous others. Prepare to discover why losing a crush is both liberating and incredibly unnerving, how to fall in love with an imaginary image, and the egoistic side of romance. Since this is a very personal subject, it's quite acceptable if you don't agree with these observations. Like practically every one of my videos, I primarily want this to serve as a starting point for your own ideas. Let's start by examining the main way that Stendhal believes we get a crush and how it is closely linked to the imagination. First, crystallization and imagination. The ability to fantasize is one of the most exciting aspects of being human. We can start playing imaginatively at a very young age, creating these small worlds to explore and enjoy, either by ourselves or with company. According to some biologists, the imagination is an amazing survival skill. It enables us to envision the potential results of a wide variety of scenarios, enabling us to plan a course of action in a great deal more detail than we could if we were incapable of fantasizing or imagining. In addition to any evolutionary benefits, this has enabled us to produce outstanding literary, philosophical, and artistic creations. Additionally, Stendhal asserts that it plays a crucial role in the initial phases of intense love. Crystallization is the primary concept that underpins Stendhal's examination of falling in love. Although he uses this term quite loosely, it basically refers to the process by which we gradually come to love someone until we are totally enamored with them, even when we may not have many reasons to do so. For instance, consider Othello by Shakespeare. Othello describes how he captured Desdemona's heart in the first act, and she strongly concurs with his story. The general would regale her with stories about his experiences, including how he had witnessed all of these amazing things and put himself in grave danger. He described his emotions and recollections to her, which let her see Othello as the handsome hero he was. This was when Desdemona's fantasy seized hold. Despite Othello's seeming bravery and kindness, she was captivated by the stories he told her and carried them away in her thoughts. She developed an opinion of Othello that was much different from what she had personally experienced or from which there was proof, which strengthened her love for him to the extent that she would gladly accompany him to battle. This attitude was cleverly summed up by poet John Keats, who accused young people of transforming their Wellingtons into Romeo's boots and their lover's hair comb into a tiara. This construction is rather simple. After meeting someone and learning a few things about them, we draw a wide range of conclusions about them that may or may not be accurate, but do heighten our feelings for them. According to Stendhal, this plays a significant role in the early phases of love and helps to explain how our sense of reason might be subverted when we see someone we find attractive. We begin to emphasize their positive attributes throughout this crystallization process, and if we go too far, they practically turn into a caricature of themselves. This is not always a bad thing in some respects. Hell, if our beloved happens to be that amazing, our crystallizations may even provide us with an accurate image of them. However, Stendhal also notes that this process is, in a sense, disconnected from the person we are in love with as they truly are. It's possible that our creative guesses are accurate, But it's also possible that we are using whatever wonderful traits we can think of to fill in the information gaps, which is why we are more in love with the concept of someone than with them. This can be somewhat compared to selecting options. The more you don't know about someone, the more positive qualities they might possess. You never know who might be witty and charming until you've had a lengthy talk with them. They may be the greatest person in the world in bed until you've shared a bed with them. You cannot assume that someone is incredibly strong, composed, and wise until you have witnessed them in a very trying circumstance. According to Boethius, we may consider someone to be a philosopher if they remain silent. Crushes are great for this because, for the most part, these are people we haven't met romantically. It is easy to think that you would be ideal for each other, even if you have a crush on a close friend. However, you have no idea what they would be like in a relationship with you. The actual issue will then be firmly forgotten as you allow this imaginative idea to roam freely in your mind. This is, in a sense, what sets a crush apart from just the beginning of a relationship. A crush is only a potential relationship before it materializes. Additionally, the standard crush settings strike the ideal mix between proximity and familiarity. People frequently develop crushes on coworkers, classmates, or university students. In any case, you see them frequently, but not frequently enough to lose their mystique. Some folks may simply want a small amount of mystery. It may seem like a lot to others, but the important thing is that there is enough space for the imagination to infiltrate and begin working its crystallizing magic. Naturally, it makes sense for the prospect of being with the right person to take up a significant amount of your thoughts if you are truly sure that it is possible. It makes sense that your other priorities would fall in line if an all-knowing God appeared at your door tomorrow, presented you to someone, and assured you that they would provide you happiness for the rest of your life. According to Stendhal, our imagination works so effectively that we begin to think that our crystalline lover actually exists. As a result, our psyche naturally focuses on them, sometimes to the point of obsession. Unfortunately, if the idealized image is abruptly destroyed, this can also result in extreme disappointment. According to Stendhal, this can become extremely excessive. When you're feeling very amorous, practically everything might bring back memories of your significant other. For example, you can see a book you believe they would like or watch something and think how much better it would be if they were around. The possibilities are unlimited once you enter the realm of fantasy, where you can use anything and everything's opposite to further your developing amorous venture. Naturally, not everyone will experience this emotion to the same degree. When it comes to crystallization, I believe that as we age, we grow accustomed to keeping our feet firmly placed on the ground. However, I continue to believe that Stendhal is spot on. Many other intellectuals have also noted this, from the lovers' idealization of one another in Mozart's Così fan tutte to the young Romeo's worship of Juliet as the sun. Since we frequently see it in ourselves and in the actions of those around us, the infatuation of passion has served as the foundation for a great deal of successful comedy and tragedy. However, this may also account for the intensity of emotion that can accompany a crush. How about the kind of pain it can cause? Ironically, Stendhal examines the conflict between two well-known romantic traits in this passage, drawing on a recurring issue among thinkers about love. Crushes mix love, passion, and fantasy, often defying logic. Inspired by Stendhal, this text explores how imagination and crystallization idealize the other, creating a love based more on fantasy than reality. I'll show you how crushes can be intense, painful, and liberating, and how disillusionment can arise when the idealized image falls apart. Loves, struggles, victories, and losses. The question of whether the lovers will end up together is the source of tension in practically all romance stories. From Twilight to Romeo and Juliet, the main characters are kept in a dance of never quite achieving their happily ever after while being tantalizingly close to it until they either meet a happy ending or a sad death. The story usually ends rather fast after the ultimate resolution, since the element that kept us interested in the action has vanished. And this makes perfect sense if you believe psychologists like Esther Perel. Based on her years of experience as a couples therapist, she finds that when we perceive our spouse as somewhat different from ourselves and not necessarily committed to the relationship, we experience great desire. In other words, she suggests that couples maintain a certain amount of independence in their lives and hobbies in order to maintain a sense of the other, so their spouse may continuously learn about them, rather than maintaining partnerships in a state of uncertainty. For Perel, erotic tension is created and maintained, in part, by the excitement of discovery. Oddly enough, romance literature is where this is most common. The female lead's ongoing exploration of an increasing number of facets of their lover's personality is emphasized in a number of contemporary romance novels, including Lady Chastity's Lover. Furthermore, Perel is not the only one who has brought this to light. Stendhal fully emphasizes this point, particularly in the beginning of a romantic relationship. Let's imagine that the crystallization process is well on, and that we are rather enamored with our beloved's concept. According to Stendhal, the inclusion of doubt solidifies this. He notes that our romantic feelings are cemented by the right balance of worry that the person we are in love with won't feel the same way about us, and hope that they will. Particularly when it comes to temporary infatuation, at least in some circumstances. He refers to this as the second crystallization, and it occurs when we begin to see our beloved as someone who may both share and dismiss our feelings, solidifying their appeal in our thoughts. Stendhal believes that this is the ideal combination for increasing attachment and so fortifying affection, especially when combined with the human propensity to crave things that we might not be able to obtain. The fact that Grushenka is constantly just out of Mitya's grasp, in addition to the beauty of her looks and character traits, fuels his love for her in Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. Stendhal himself recounts several stories in which people are enraged by their doubts while also being swept away by their own hopes. He describes how he was gradually driven insane by someone whose beloved forbade them from visiting her, save for once every 2 weeks. He valued her much more because of the distance and dread of losing her, but he was also captivated by the remote possibility of gaining her approval during those bi-weekly encounters. That was the ideal balance between hope and uncertainty that spoke to his unique intellect. It can be different for other individuals, though he also notes that it frequently takes remarkably little hope to keep us enamored with someone we have no possibility of being with. Stendhal is rather explicit about the individual variations at play. Naturally, this also helps to explain the unique suffering that frequently accompanies crushes. A crush is, by definition, someone you want, but are unsure if they want you back. However, this makes it a state that is highly susceptible to swinging between annoyance and hope. As Stendhal notes, it can make us detectives. We look for signs of what our significant other thinks of us, and we celebrate when we believe we have discovered proof of their love. On the other hand, when we believe that we will never be together, we are thrown into varied degrees of misery. Once more, people may experience this to varying degrees. As we age, the range of this oscillation will decrease for many of us. However, Stendhal and I both know a lot of grown-ups who will readily let this loop to take up nearly all of their thoughts. Additionally, this does make some logic. The rest of the world seems so dull in compared to the dramatic emotional roller coaster that is taking place here. I've seen a lot of people online say that having a crush makes their lives really stressful, but when they don't, they're actually quite bored. And Stendhal does a fantastic job of explaining this. He notes that there is a mixture of relief and a tiny emptiness when such a great yearning is eventually let go. Our will has been fighting its way through our minds, but it has suddenly stopped. Naturally, this leaves a void in its wake, one that might make us feel a bit sad for a while. The feeling that one might experience when they lose trust in God or become disillusioned with their work is considerably lesser and more cautious. Another unsavory dynamic that might arise in developing relationships is clarified by Stendhal's views. In recent years, the phrase love bombing has been used to describe when someone lavishes their beloved with excessive amounts of care in an attempt to bolster their aspirations of a loving and caring relationship, then withdraws that amorous attention, leaving the other person to plead for it back, piece by piece. The reason this is so upsetting is somewhat explained by Stendhal's analysis. Someone could live for months or perhaps years without their hope completely dying because of the initial exaggerated devotion. Then, they can continue to hold on to the notion of the relationship that existed from the beginning, regardless of how scared, nervous, or ignored they feel. Throughout the courtship, they are kept on the brink of hopelessness. Therefore, it makes sense that this would cause them great pain. According to Stendhal, this is an excessive and unhealthy form of something we frequently do to ourselves. It's really worthwhile to consider, particularly when we are obsessing over a crush. Perhaps we are merely puppets, moving to the meticulously composed strings of uncertainty and hope. Esther Perel's second observation regarding infidelity also fits very well with this. It frequently doesn't work out when someone leaves their partner for their affair partner. According to Perel, this is because they found their affair partner so attractive since they were in this space between hope and anxiety, and when they were no longer a good fit for this position, they were also cast aside. Outside of this situation, in our own little crushes, we can wonder how much we really love this person and where we've just fallen into a cycle of emotional highs and lows. Naturally, the response will vary depending on the circumstances. That being said, we will now explore some of the less innocent facets of a crush, including how we occasionally pursue someone else's attention solely for our own ego's sake. If you identified with these reflections on the emotional impact of a crush, don't forget to like the video. I want to know, do you think the emotions of a crush are more intense because of idealization or uncertainty? Ego, vanity, and identity. Stendhal makes a distinction between 4 categories of love at the outset of his work. There are other types of love: vain love, passionate love, which is the type of sincere admiration we have been examining so far, courtly love, which is a kind of formal game, and physical love, which is solely focused on sex. I want to focus on this final type of love for this section, since it highlights a very common reason for a crush that we frequently attempt to overlook. Stendhal uses the term vain love to describe our propensity to feel anything for someone based on their fondness for us, rather than their identity or personal traits. For example, let's imagine that, like me, you were raised as a gangly, somewhat awkward-looking adolescent who frequently felt somewhat unsightly. As you get older, you may then look for other people's affections because you believe you need proof that you're not a repulsive being, but rather that you're acceptable and lovable. James Fosshager, a psychoanalyst, describes his patient Natalie's upbringing, in which she experienced a great deal of rejection as a result of her attempts to love people. This was particularly evident in her father, who frequently disregarded her heroic attempts to establish a connection. Then, Fosshager explains how Natalie tenaciously continued to look for love in all of its manifestations, perhaps most crucially in the form of confirmation that she was a deserving, lovable individual. This is because, according to Fosshager, our quests for love are closely linked to our perceptions of ourselves, and our egos are frequently the motivation for pursuing love from others. Sisyphus 55 examines a related topic in his own Crush film, which I'll include a link to in the description. He makes reference to Jacques Lacan's writings. According to Lacan, many people's main desire in a romantic relationship is to be desired. They look for someone they consider admirable to mirror, accept, and validate an idealized version of themselves. In other words, they adore what this person's love would reveal about them. Stendhal skillfully notes that we frequently might not be conscious that this is the reason for our obsession, stating that vanity will masquerade as desire, and that it will do it so convincingly that it may even deceive us. If we accept the psychological theories put forward by Fosshager and Lacan, then this makes a lot of sense. We don't intentionally exploit someone to improve our own image. Rather, we believe we have a strong desire for them. But the unconscious driving force behind this desire is to fulfill an additional egoistic goal. Note that Stendhal does not criticize anyone for this. Rather, he merely states that it is among the things we frequently categorize as love, whether correctly or not. The line between conceited love and genuine passion is probably going to be somewhat hazy in real life. Regardless of the initial reason for the devotion, it goes without saying that if you are deeply passionate about someone, their love will improve your perception of yourself. Stendhal felt compelled to create a book about love, in part because we frequently don't fully understand why we appreciate someone. Even if you may attempt to enumerate all of the reasons you like your sweetheart, there seems to be some inexpressible quality that is left unsaid. Building on Stendhal, it could be more helpful to consider passion, and this kind of harmless vanity, as two drives present in a great deal of attachment, with the proportion varying for each personality and situation. However, this can once more explain why a crush can become so excruciating. Sometimes, not only our emotions are at stake, but also our fundamental perception of ourselves. Near the end of his work, Stendhal discusses another type of conceited love, which is the Don Juan archetype. This individual only serves as a tool in their quest for other people. Since they are intentionally using their beloved only as a means to an objective, it does not even seem appropriate to state that they love them. Since they are always putting people at an emotional distance, they are much more concerned with the number of lovers than with the genuine bond they have with them. Although Stendhal is obviously referring to the stereotype of the male philanderer in this instance, there is no reason why this needs to be gendered or even restricted to sex. That individual will be just as much in the spirit of utilizing someone while keeping them emotionally distant if they intentionally keep them around, because they thrive on their approval or their monetary prosperity. The main characteristic that sets them apart is their intense love for oneself, which makes them blind to the pain they inflict and believes that only they are capable of happiness or sorrow. Stendhal makes a valid point here for two reasons. First, we should probably avoid being like Don Juan ourselves. Many of the greatest ethical thinkers in history, including Aristotle, C.S. Lewis, and Hannah Arendt, have noted that the path to cruelty is very long and only somewhat lessens. Even though we may not initially want to utilize someone in this way, we gradually develop a habit over time, and eventually that turns into a quality of our character. And without intending to do anything of the sort, we have unknowingly inflicted serious injury to another individual. Crucially, Stendhal believes that adopting this instrumental mindset will prevent us from experiencing any lasting romance, since by keeping people apart, we guarantee that we will never develop a true intimate bond with anyone. Second, though, it emphasizes how crucial it is to be cautious about who we fall in love with. As we mentioned in the last part, doubting someone's love frequently makes us want them much more. However, if they intentionally try to elicit this response, like a Don Juan, to better control us, this dynamic could turn into something really harmful. We will suffer greatly in the short term, but they may have to deal with the long-term effects of this strategy. The stakes are ultimately very high when it comes to affection because, in the right hands, a crush can be gently nurtured into an obsession, while the other person has no intention of reciprocating our feelings or letting us know that they don't share our feelings. Naturally, this only applies when there is overt malice, which I hope is not very common. Lastly, though, I want to play devil's advocate to the notion that crushes are essentially stupid and contrast Stendhal's method with some other ideas. Now I want to know, do you think it's possible to completely separate our romantic desires from the search for personal validation? Respecting the crush, we often picture something extremely childish when we think of what a crush is. We disregard it as the domain of schoolyards and teenage fantasies, unsuited for the respectable pursuits of adulthood. Yes, we have had crushes in the past, but we now consider them to be inappropriate for children. In order to regain our sense of dignity, we sometimes try our hardest to conceal or denounce our past infatuations, as François de la Rochefoucauld once noted, because loving frequently takes on such a significant role that we feel it is nearly embarrassing in retrospect. Maybe this is the only appropriate thing to do. After all, a variety of philosophical traditions have sought to achieve a state of mental tranquility that intense love will disturb. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, recognized desire as a bad state, since it would disrupt the natural serenity he named joy. Later writers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius repeated this, cautioning against allowing the ups and downs of life outside of ourselves to impact our inner emotions. According to Schopenhauer, the only way to break free from life's recurring cycles of sadness is to gradually control our own wants until we become naturally austere. And the problem with intense love is that it has a way of destroying our inner peace. Being a powerful and emotionally invested desire, it takes control of our thoughts and makes us care deeply about things that are completely beyond our control, regardless of whether the other person feels the same way we do. In essence, these philosophers correctly note that passion heightens the emotional intensity of human existence. A common pattern in a crush, for example, is that we get excited by optimism and depressed by uncertainty, but calm neutrality is essentially left behind. However, it's important to consider whether this more passionate approach also has any philosophical significance. Friedrich Nietzsche was a well-known opponent of Stoicism, who noted that the philosophy foregrounded the extreme highs of life in order to likewise avoid the severe lows. He put out a whole other option, one that values our instinctual and passionate natures much more. Although Nietzsche does not advocate for us to follow our passions to the fullest extent, he is concerned that the Stoic method may dull our emotional sides instead of teaching us how to control and guide them. One of the traits of Zarathustra's Übermensch in Thus Spoke Zarathustra is their joy in their own misery. Instead of attempting to reduce the range of their emotional states, they give their suffering purpose, making it not only tolerable, but also something to be rejoiced in. Although this is a somewhat challenging and severe idea to understand, a common example of the same idea would be a parent who not only voluntarily sacrifices their own mental health for their children, but also actively loves doing so. We may also consider Camus' Absurd Man, who, rather than escaping their emotions, uses them as a rationale for continuing despite the absurdity of existence. In the myth of Sisyphus, he tells of people who are so consumed by their innate will to live that they do not look for the cosmos to have any objective purpose. Despite this, they live fully and without regret, embracing both their joy and their sorrow with equal fervor. In certain respects, these two methods create opposing components in a life philosophy that we can decide to balance. The degree to which we restrict our emotional range and prioritize composure over fervor will also determine how stoic we become in this sense of the word, and vice versa. The problem with crushes and innate affection in general is that if we are unable to completely prevent them, they at least provide us with an excuse to consider other options. One of Stendhal's main insights is that once romantic passion takes hold, it is difficult to shake. According to him, the entire notion of stopping to love is ridiculous when your beliefs are validated every second, till the months go by and love becomes second nature. And it's simple to feel humiliated in such a circumstance. We have a propensity to vilify being out of control in any way and to value staying cool under pressure. However, there are instances in which it is very challenging to control our emotions, and intense love is a prime example. And in these circumstances, we might need a philosophy that teaches us to accept and give dignity to this emotion. This is what Stendhal tries to do throughout the entire book. He reminds us that our passions are entirely natural, and in some situations can even make us happier rather than making fun of them. However, he does not downplay the negative aspects of passion and admits that they can result in excruciating pain. He looks at us with clear eyes and does this without passing judgment on us. He reminds us that this is a very significant aspect of being human for many people. He acknowledges the irrational parts of the human mind and even goes so far as to appreciate them rather than joining in the derisive cries that such passion is essentially stupid. In the end, this kind of irrationalism has done a fantastic job of guaranteeing the survival of our species to this day. I truly like Stendhal's work because he offers a concept of passionate love that acknowledges the potential worth and desirability of human emotion, while acknowledging that it is a trade-off rather than glorifying it by disregarding all of its drawbacks and making it into something it is not. We will be less at ease the more passion we let into our lives. According to Stendhal, we can make this decision with an open mind and a complete understanding of its advantages and disadvantages. Therefore, it's not necessarily a stupid one. It is up to us to determine whether we are okay with this arrangement or whether we would prefer to exchange some of our passion for a little more peace. In other words, according to Stendhal, a crush hurts because its essential elements enable both the highest levels of happiness and the lowest levels of despair. Although striking a balance will be quite personal, understanding the conflict between these two strategies will guide our decision-making. For Stendhal, passion is a brilliant and dangerous energy that each of us would do well to wrestle with, either to embrace or vanquish it, rather than a problem that needs to be solved. If these reflections on crushes and crushes have made you think in a new way, leave a like. This helps the channel reach more people and keep bringing you content like this. And how about sharing this video with someone who can relate? Now, tell me, do you think passion is more of a force to be embraced or a challenge to be overcome? I'd love to hear from you in the comments.